You're sitting at your kitchen table on a Sunday night, laptop open to Zillow for the 100th time this month. Your partner leans over your shoulder as you filter by price, 400,000 max. The same 12 houses appear, again. One's a tear down. Two are in school districts with one-star ratings. The rest are 45 minutes from both your jobs. You refresh the page, still 12. You and your partner together make $150,000 a year. You're in the top 20% of American households. And you cannot afford a normal house in a normal neighborhood with a normal commute. Sound familiar? Here's what makes this moment so disorienting. Your parents bought their first house on one income that was probably $60,000 in today's dollars. Your dad was an accountant. Your mom worked part-time. They got a 3-bedroom in a decent suburb at age 28. You're 34, you have double the income, and you're looking at houses that need $50,000 in foundation work. Something isn't just harder. Something fundamentally broke. I'm going to show you exactly what happened, and it's not what you think. Housing prices didn't just rise with inflation or even with household income. They rose with mortgage approval algorithms specifically designed to capture both incomes. The system reverse engineered your combined debt-to-income ratio and raised prices to match it. What looks like a housing shortage is actually a housing trap, and I can prove it with the math that mortgage brokers don't show you. Here's the question we're answering. How did having two incomes transform from giving you twice the buying power into becoming the minimum requirement just to afford what one income used to buy? And what trap did you walk into the moment you needed both paychecks to qualify? Let's start with the baseline everyone knows. The median home price in America right now is $425,000. In job-rich metros where people actually want to live, $600,000 plus. Seattle, Austin, Denver, Boston, these aren't coastal elite cities anymore. These are normal places with normal jobs, and the math to buy in these markets is brutal before you even start. Here's what everyone tells you that baseline looks like. You need 20% down. On a $425,000 house, that's $85,000, just sitting there in cash. After taxes, most people take 5 to 7 years to save that if they're aggressive and nothing goes wrong. But let's say you have it. You put down your $85,000, you finance $340,000 at 7% interest because that's where rates actually are right now. Your monthly payment is $2,260. Add property taxes at 1.2% annually, that's another $425 per month. Homeowners insurance in most markets is running $150 to $200 monthly now. HOA fees if applicable. Let's call it another $150, and everyone forgets maintenance. The standard rule is 1% of home value annually. That's another $350 per month you need to budget, or you're just deferring disasters. Add it up. Your true monthly housing cost on a $425,000 median-priced home is $3,540 every month. Before you buy groceries, before you pay for gas, before you cover a single other expense in your life. Now here's where it gets interesting. Mortgage lenders use something called the 28% rule. Your monthly housing payment shouldn't exceed 28% of your gross monthly income. It's not a suggestion. It's how they calculate what you qualify for. So let's reverse engineer this. If your housing payment is $3,540 and that can only be 28% of your gross income, you need to make $12,643 per month gross. That's $151,000, that's $714 per year. Together, before taxes. Look at that number. You need to be in the top 20% of American households just to afford the median-priced home. And that's assuming you somehow saved $85,000 while also paying rent for 7 years. The math doesn't work. It cannot work. It will not work. But here's where it gets worse. That $150,000 combined income, it's not real, not in your pocket. Let me show you what actually happens to it. Federal income tax at that bracket is going to take about $18,000. State income tax in most states takes another $6,000 to $9,000, depending where you live. Social Security and Medicare take another $11,000. Health insurance premiums for two people average $14,000. annually now if you're buying decent coverage. Your actual take home on 150,000 gross is about $100,000. Maybe 105,000 if you're in a no-income tax state. That $3,540 monthly housing payment, that's $42,480 per year. You just spent 40% of your actual take-home pay on housing, not 28% of gross like the bank calculates. 40% of what actually hits your account, and you haven't bought food yet. You haven't paid for 2 cars because you can't afford to live anywhere with decent transit at this price point. You haven't covered utilities or internet or phone bills. You haven't saved $1 for retirement. You haven't built an emergency fund. You've just signed up to spend 40% of your real money on your house payment every month for 30 years. Let me show you what this actually looks like day to day. The Andersons make exactly this, 150,000 combined. He's a project manager making 85,000. She's a senior accountant making 65,000. They're 36 and 34. No kids yet, but planning to have them. They bought their house 2 years ago for $430,000. It needed work, but it was move-in capable and in a decent school district. They thought they were being responsible. They had the down payment. They qualified comfortably. The mortgage broker said they were approved for up to $600,000, but they showed restraint and stayed under $450,000. Here's their actual monthly reality. Combined gross income is $12,500. Take home after all, deductions is $8,300. Their mortgage payment is $2,800, including escrow for taxes and insurance. HOA is $125. Utilities average $320. Internet and phones are $190. That's $3,435 before they've driven anywhere or eaten anything. They're down to $4,865. 2 car payments because they both commute. $670 combined. Car insurance is $280. Gas is $420 with current prices and their commute distances. Minimum student loan payments total $840. They're at $2,210 remaining. For everything else, for 2 adults planning to become 3 or 4, groceries run $700 monthly when they cook at home most nights. Basic household supplies and toiletries are another $120. His gym membership that keeps his anxiety manageable is $40. Dog food and vet budget is another $90. They're at $1,260 left. For the entire month, for 2 people. They're not saving for retirement yet beyond his company match. They have $4,000 in savings total, which wouldn't cover 2 months of expenses if something happened, and something always happens. Here's what that actually feels like day to day. It feels like saying no when your friends want to do a weekend trip that would cost $350 total. It feels like her cutting her own hair because $80 every 10 weeks is $80. It feels like calculating whether they can afford the $35 field trip fee when they have kids because that month has 5 weeks and grocery money is allocated by 4-week months. It feels like his check engine light coming on and both of them going silent in the car because they know they don't have $800 free right now. It feels like being in the top 20% of earners and living like you're broke. And the brutal part? They're doing everything right according to conventional wisdom. They bought below their approval amount. They have stable jobs. They're not spending money on luxuries. They cook at home. They drive reasonable cars. This is what responsible home ownership looks like at median home prices, with above median household income in 2026 America. But let's address the elephant in the room because I know what you're thinking. Maybe the Andersons are an outlier. Maybe they have unusually high student loans or expensive cars. So let me show you the math at different income levels because this trap closes on almost everyone. If you make $100,000 combined, that $425,000 median home isn't even a conversation. At 7% interest with 20% down, your payment is $3,540. The 28% rule says you can afford $2,333 monthly. You'd need to find a house for $290,000. Go look at what $290,000 buys in any job-rich metro right now. It buys condemned properties and teardowns. If you make $200,000 combined, you finally have breathing room, right? Wrong. You can now afford the 425,000 median home comfortably. Congratulations! You're in the top 10% of American households and you get access to the median. Not something nice. Not something desirable. The median. The definition of average. And here's what that means in most markets. A house built in 1973 that needs a new roof soon, has original windows losing heat, features kitchen cabinets from 2002 with builder-grade everything, includes carpet in the bathrooms from some godforsaken reason, and is 38 minutes from your job if traffic is light. This is what $200,000 in household income buys you. And you'll still spend 38% of your take-home on that house after taxes and deductions. Now, here's what nobody tells you about how this happened, because this didn't occur naturally. This was engineered. In 1970, the median home price was about $23,000. The median household income was $9,600. Home prices were 2.4 times annual income. That same year, 70% of households were single income. One person working could buy a house. By 2000, dual income households became the majority. 63% of married couples both worked. And something fascinating happened in the mortgage industry. Lenders realized they could approve larger loans if they counted both incomes. Makes sense, right? Two incomes, bigger loan, everyone wins. Except that's not what happened. What happened is housing prices immediately began tracking dual income approval amounts instead of single income amounts. Sellers realized buyers could qualify for more, so they raised prices to capture that approval capacity. Builders realized they could charge more because banks would approve more. The entire market restructured itself around the assumption of two incomes. By 2024, median home price hit $425,000. Median household income hit $74,000. Home prices were now 5.7 times annual income. They more than doubled as a multiple of income in 50 years, and 83% of married couples under 45 are now dual income households. It's not a choice anymore. It's a requirement. Here's the mechanism you need to understand. Mortgage lenders make money on loan volume and interest payments over time. The bigger the loan, the more interest they collect. They profit when you borrow the maximum you can afford, so they designed approval algorithms specifically to capture both incomes at the highest possible debt-to-income ratio the system allows. The 28% rule means your housing payment can consume 28% of your gross income. But there's a second rule they use, the 43% rule. Your total debt payments, including your mortgage, student loans, car payments, and credit cards, cannot exceed 43% of gross income. These aren't safety limits designed to protect you. They're extraction limits designed to determine the maximum amount of your income they can redirect to debt payments before you mathematically default. And here's the trap within the trap. The moment you need both incomes to qualify for your mortgage, you've eliminated your safety net. If either person loses their job, gets sick, needs to take parental leave, or wants to scale back hours, you can't make your payment. You're locked in. Both of you. For 30 years. The mortgage doesn't care that you want to have kids and one of you wants to stay home for 2 years. The mortgage doesn't care that your industry is unstable. The mortgage doesn't care that you're burning out and need a lower stress job that pays $20,000 less. You thought you were buying a house. You actually bought a requirement that both of you maintain your current income level until the mortgage is paid off, or you sell. That's the trap. Your second income didn't give you buying power. It became the collateral the bank required to give you the loan. Let me show you what happens when you actually try to live in this system. Month 1 and 2, you're managing. It's tight, but you're making it work. You're proud you bought a house. Month 4, the dishwasher dies. $650 you didn't budget for because you're still building your emergency fund. It goes on a credit card. Month 7, one of you needs a root canal. Dental insurance covers half. $800 out of pocket. Credit card. Month 9, your company does layoffs. You keep your job, but your partner's position is eliminated. Severance lasts 6 weeks. You're 3 months into unemployment, and the emergency fund that was supposed to exist never materialized because you were spending 40% of take-home on housing. Now you're carrying credit card debt from the dishwasher and the dental work, making minimum payments that barely cover interest. You're liquidating retirement accounts and paying penalties to keep the mortgage current. And you're having conversations about bankruptcy at 37 years old, despite doing everything society told you was responsible. This isn't a hypothetical. This is the actual progression for hundreds of thousands of households right now. The system is designed to operate you at maximum capacity with zero margin for error. And life is nothing but errors. Here's what makes this so insidious. The housing market incentivizes this trap at every level. Real estate agents make commission based on sale price. They profit when you buy the most expensive house you qualify for. Mortgage brokers make money on loan volume. They profit when you borrow the maximum. Home builders profit from higher prices. Inspectors charge based on home value. Insurance companies charge based on replacement cost. Every single entity in the transaction makes more money the more you spend. Nobody makes money when you say no thanks. Nobody profits when you rent instead. Nobody gets a commission when you buy a cheaper house in a less desirable area. Nobody wins when you decide to wait or save more. The entire industry is structured to move you into the maximum debt load you can technically service on paper. And then they wrapped it in cultural messaging that made it seem insane not to do this. They rebranded being house poor as being a responsible adult. They turned stretching to afford it into a virtue instead of a warning sign. They convinced an entire generation that if you're not spending half your take-home on housing, you're not really trying. They made 30-year debt servitude sound like the American dream. But here's the part that might make you angry. Your parents didn't do this. Their house in 1982 cost 2.8 times their single income. Your dad's salary alone covered the mortgage at 22% of gross. Your mom worked part-time by choice, not necessity. They had margin. When the car broke, it was annoying, not devastating. When one of them got laid off, they tightened up for a few months but didn't lose the house. They built actual savings. They took vacations. They helped you pay for college. They give you advice from that reality. They tell you buying a home is always a good investment. They say you're throwing money away on rent. They ask when you're finally going to settle down and buy something. And they cannot understand why you're struggling when you make so much more than they did. They don't understand that the game changed. The math is different now. What worked for them doesn't work for you, not because you're less capable, but because the system restructured itself to extract both incomes instead of one. They bought in a market designed for single-income households. You're trying to buy in a market designed to capture dual-income households at maximum debt-to-income ratios. The advice disconnect is painful because they think you're making bad choices. You're not. You're facing different math. When they bought their house for $60,000, they needed $12,000 down, and their mortgage was $480 monthly. At their $45,000 single income, that was 12.8% of gross. They had money left over for everything else. You're looking at spending 40% of take-home just to get in the door. The ratios are not comparable. The game is not the same. So let me give you permission to do something radical. You can choose not to play this game. You can look at the math, see that it requires both of you to work at maximum capacity for 30 years with zero safety net, and say no thanks. That's a legitimate choice. That's not failure, that's math. You can rent in a good neighborhood near your jobs and build savings and retirement accounts and maintain flexibility. You can buy in a cheaper market and commute or work remotely. You can buy a smaller house that only requires 1.2 incomes instead of 2.0. You can wait until you have a larger down payment that brings the monthly payment into a sustainable range. You can move to a lower cost of living area entirely and reset your ratios. All of those choices are valid. All of them are smart in different circumstances. None of them make you less of an adult or less successful. They make you someone who did the math and made decisions based on reality instead of cultural pressure. Real wealth isn't owning an expensive house. Real wealth is having margin. It's having money left over after your fixed expenses. It's being able to lose a job without losing your home. It's being able to have kids and let one parent scale back if they want to. It's being able to take a lower-paying job you actually enjoy. It's having an emergency fund that can handle actual emergencies. It's retiring at 65 instead of 73 because you weren't servicing massive debt your entire career. The housing trap wants you to believe that buying the biggest house you can technically afford is financial maturity. It's not. It's financial prison, and you get to choose whether you walk in. Here's your actual math check. Take your combined gross income. Multiply by zero point 0.6 to get approximate take home. Multiply that by zero point 0.3. That's the maximum monthly housing payment that leaves you margin for everything else. Not what the bank will approve. What you can actually afford and still build savings, still handle emergencies, still have a life. For most people, that number is significantly lower than what they're pre-approved for. For the Andersons making $150,000, that's $2,500 monthly, all in for housing. At current interest rates, that means a house around $325,000, not $430,000 like they bought. They'd need to look in less desirable areas or buy a smaller house or rent until they had enough down payment to bring the payment down. And here's the thing. They'd still have a place to live. They'd still be safe. They'd still be adults with jobs and furniture and a life. They'd just have breathing room. They'd have money to save. They'd have flexibility if something changed. They'd have margin. That's the choice. Maximum house with zero margin or sustainable house with actual breathing room. The bank profits from the first choice. You profit from the second. Nobody told you this because nobody profits from you choosing option 2. But now you know the mechanism. Now you've seen the math. Now you understand how the trap works. Your second income didn't give you twice the buying power. It gave the housing market permission to charge twice as much. And the moment you needed both incomes to qualify, you locked both of you into maintaining those incomes for 3 decades. You get to decide if that trade is worth it.